We have covered the top 7 players on the Kings coming into this season, so now it is time to give some love to the deeper bench players. So we are going to be previewing the seasons for the next 3 guys on the Kings roster that can make an impact, and that will probably, I would guess, be significant portions of the rotation, at least for times of this season. And so those 3 players are Jordan McLaughlin, Trey Lyles, and Alex Len. I think Devin Carter probably would have been a part of this if he was healthy, but obviously, unfortunately, he is not healthy, and that just gives opportunity to a guy like Jordan McLaughlin as a veteran to step in and make an impact. It's obviously so important to hit on the guys right around the edges that are going to be part of the rotation, to hit on the minimum contract players like McLaughlin and like Alex Len. And when you have a guy like Alex Len who just keeps coming back on vet minimum contracts, I mean, that's really important for a guy that can come in and play 10 minutes per game behind Sabonis and just give solid minutes. That's a big deal to have a good veteran like that, and to have another good veteran like Jordan McLaughlin, and obviously Trey Lyles, although Lyles isn't on a minimum. I think we'll see the rotation change throughout the season. You're never going to have a full season where the rotation is just going to stay the same and you're going to play the same 10 guys every night. I mean, we saw it last season, and I know it made some people mad because it's like, why are you going away from Keon Ellis? Why are you going away from Alex Len for the likes of JaVale McGee or Chris Duarte, when certain guys like Alex Len were performing well? But, Mike Brown, he talked about it, and he just talked about the importance of giving guys minutes so that if an injury arises, those guys will be ready to step in. Because, I don't think you're going to make the playoffs or not make the playoffs based on if you are playing Alex Len every single game of the season versus if you're playing Orlando Robinson now, who is the next guy in that center rotation. And so I would guess we're going to see a guy like, Orlando Robinson get some time. Maybe we'll see Jalen McDaniels get some opportunity, and we'll see, I don't know, maybe like Mason Jones on a 2-way get some time, or Isaiah Crawford. But I think when, towards the end of the season, when the playoff rotation is kind of shaking out, these are the 3 guys of those deep bench guys that are going to be in the rotation. And Devin Carter coming back definitely throws a wrench into things a little bit. But if we're kind of not considering him for the time being as a rookie who's going to come in mid-season, I think these will be the guys. But I also think it's important just to try out other guys in your rotation, because you're going to need to have some versatility, possibly. You never know what guys are going to play well when it becomes very important, or who's going to get injured. And so you're going to need to see maybe some Trey Lyles at the 5, running some small ball with Jordan McLaughlin in some, 3-guard lineups and things like that. Because like I said, I don't think you're going to make the playoffs or miss the playoffs based on kind of tinkering with rotations at the back end, but I think you could win or lose a playoff series based on whether your team is adaptable and has that versatility that you've already kind of explored in the regular season. Before we get into the rest of the player previews and go through these 3 players individually, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to subscribe, leave a like. Shout out to Cody Willis, as always, for being a member. And also, after recording this, there was a new member. So shout out to Joe Mama for becoming a member and supporting the channel. And also, great name. I'm also adding a few perks for memberships if you would like to become a member. Members now are going to get early access by a couple days to non-time sensitive videos. So that doesn't include like the post-game recaps, because those need to be out for everyone right away. But for videos like this, they'll be out a couple days early for members. And then also you get to vote each month during the season on the player of the month. And then I'm going to be making a video on that player. So anyways, let's get back into the player previews. And so we're going to start with the newcomer, Jordan McLaughlin, because he's the most interesting to me because he is new. He's 28 years old. He's listed at 6 foot. I feel like he's more maybe 5'10", or, maybe a little shorter than 6 foot. That's what he seems to me anyways. But he's very much the Davion Mitchell replacement, a very similar player because of their size. they're both good defensive players, even for their size. And like I mentioned earlier, McLaughlin is kind of the placeholder for Devin Carter, but really for this season, because we don't know what we're going to get from Devin Carter, he may get that opportunity when the games are very important towards the end of the season if the Kings are in contention, for the playoffs and such. But it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of role McLaughlin can kind of carve out for himself, because Davion Mitchell's role in minutes, they were just confusing because he was a confusing player and a very inconsistent player. And also, he was a lottery pick. So there were expectations for him. And there was also, I think, always this view from everyone that he had more to give. He had a higher ceiling than what he has shown so far. But it's just that 3-point shot was letting him down, that offensive consistency, and then also his size on the defensive end. And, he shot better from 3 last season at 36%. But now that we've moved on from him, I think bringing in a guy like Jordan McLaughlin, it kind of settles what role he's going to play a little bit more. Like, no one is expecting McLaughlin to be anything more than what he's already been in his career. Like, McLaughlin has already been in a certain role in Minnesota where he's just going to be that bench player that doesn't even always play and really is just a safer pair of hands than what Davion Mitchell was. McLaughlin isn't quite, the highlight reel defender that Davion Mitchell was, but he can be very solid on that end. And really, I think it's the offensive end that McLaughlin is just going to be more consistent. Now, the 3-point shot for McLaughlin has definitely not always been consistent. He shot extremely well last season. I think it was like 47%, but that was an extreme outlier for him, and he's been all over the place in his career in terms of 3-point percentage. So not so different from Davion Mitchell in that sense. But I think McLaughlin's just a better ball handler, a better passer, a smarter passer. He's going to turn the ball over a lot less. I think he's just going to help the gears of the offense turn a little smoother. Because last season, I think there were points where, Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, there was just too much on them in terms of ball handling. And, I think DeMar will help that to some extent. But getting a guy like McLaughlin that you can just rely on a little bit to not do dumb things with the ball in his hands and to help the offense get going a little bit, to make the right plays and make the right passes, I think that'll be good. I don't think McLaughlin's always going to be in the rotation because of his height and all of the guards, obviously, that the Kings have. Even if, Devin Carter's still injured, there's definitely still the possibility that McLaughlin gets pushed out. But if the Kings go with 3-guard lineups, which we saw a lot last season, then he'll definitely be able to slide in there. I think we'll just see him utilized the same way that Davion Mitchell was utilized in a lot of ways. But I just think the Kings will be able to rely on him a little bit more on the offensive end to be more consistent. The next guy we'll talk about is Trey Lyles. Lyles, obviously a guy that, since he came over in that Marvin Bagley trade, has been great for the Kings. Has just been such a solid bench player. And I think for him and Alex Len, these two guys, it's kind of like we know what we're going to get from them. And at this point in their careers, we don't expect them to really change at all. And I think the same can be said for McLaughlin as well, except his 3-point percentage has had so much variance. So that's kind of the one difference there. But with Lyles, he's been consistent in terms of his 3-point percentage being solid. Now his 3-point shooting from game to game is not consistent. That's one thing we know about him. He gets streaky. He's either going 5 for 5 or 0 for 5. But in terms of his numbers throughout a season, he shot really well last season, 38.4% from 3 on 3.8 attempts, 58 games for him last season. Had a little bit of injury problem there, but he's a guy that's always been in the rotation for the Kings, and he played 20 minutes per game. So obviously a very key fixture in the Kings lineup, averaging 7 points per game, averaging 4.5 rebounds per game. His rebounding has been very important for this team on both ends, defensively and offensively. He averaged over 1 offensive rebound per game. I think the one thing that maybe could change for him a little bit this season is he could just see his minutes decrease slightly. And I think the reason for that is with DeMar DeRozan slotting in for Harrison Barnes, there were so many times in the past 2 seasons where we know Harrison Barnes would just have like an awful game. And so Trey Lyles would be right there to slot in and would play in clutch time. And that's just not something that's going to happen with DeRozan. There's not going to be those times where Lyles becomes a starter practically for this team. Because even if, the two guard, whoever the starting two guard is for the Kings, whether that's Keon Ellis or Kevin Huerter, even if they're both having bad games, Trey Lyles is not going to slot into the starting lineup, you wouldn't think, because him and DeRozan out there together is just really not good defensively alongside Sabonis as well. That just won't lead to good things. And so that's why I could see his minutes, him not getting those opportunities late in games to close out games. I think the one thing that he really added to the Kings late in games when he did play last season was that rebounding. I felt like there were so many times where he got clutch offensive rebounds, or at least got in there to, make something happen and get the ball bouncing around to see where it landed. But his shooting is still going to be very important, because you can always use a shooter like him, and you can always use a guy that can space the floor like that. And we haven't seen him play a lot of stretch five, but it'll probably be something the Kings go to from time to time in certain lineups. I think he's just important because that's always an option. I don't think it's the best option for the Kings. I know there are some people out there that are like Trey Lyles stretch five truthers. They want him full time to play that backup five. I'm not one of those people. I get it would space the floor really well, but I think what Alex Len brings as a backup five is just better, and I think Trey Lyles is just a very good stretch four. But Lyles he's in a contract year. He's really the only guy who isn't on like a minimum or a two-way contract that is going to be out of a contract at the end of the season. And so we know some guys elevate their games during contract years. Obviously, that's the hope. But I mean, I think we just know what we're gonna get from Trey Lyles at this point of his career. Hopefully, he has a 3-point shooting year just like he did last season, and he's just always such an important bench player for this team. And then the last guy to round out this bench trio is Alex Len, who has had kind of a weird 2 seasons with the last 2 seasons with the Kings. Obviously, 2 seasons ago, not getting much time. The Kings always wanting to go with someone else, whether that's Metu or Rashawn Holmes, and then him winning that backup 5 spot at the very end of the season, like the last 2 weeks of the season. And then last season, he got more run as the backup 5, but was injured for part of it. And then we also went with JaVale McGee, just as part of giving guys chances. And I think it made sense to give JaVale McGee a chance to win that spot, and he didn't. I think we could have done with maybe a little less of JaVale McGee as a backup 5. I think we kind of realized that he wasn't going to be the backup 5 much earlier than he got pulled out of the rotation, but that's okay. Alex Len has just been such a serviceable big, playing 10 minutes per game behind Sabonis. And like I said, I think there'll be times where we see Trey Lyles as the small ball 5. I think there'll be times where we give a guy like Orlando Robinson a shot. But I do think when it all shakes out, when it's all said and done, it will be Alex Len as the backup 5. I mean, he averages 0.7 blocks per game on 9 minutes per game last season. Because he plays just, those 9-10 minutes per game, he's able to give it his all in those minutes. He's able to just go after every rebound, go after every block, run the floor super hard, because that can sometimes be a problem for a guy at his size and what he does is the conditioning. But that's just something that he doesn't even really have to worry about. He's shown that he is a good decision maker with the ball in his hands in the dribble handoff. He can be the guy that comes in and somewhat plays that Sabonis role, so the Kings don't have to completely switch styles. Although I think we will see the Kings be able to switch styles this season because we have DeRozan. And I think with DeRozan being a very good pick and roll player, Alex Len being able to set very, very good screens, which is a big part of his game, and then rolling to the rim, I think you could see that partnership do well in the minutes that they play together. And I do think you will see those players play a lot together, that duo, because I think you're going to see DeRozan a lot when Sabonis is off the court, maybe in all of the minutes that Sabonis is off the court. Just looking at Alex Len's career, he has had a wild career. Just because he was the 5th overall pick to the Suns. High expectations, obviously. And I feel like for players picked that high, it's hard to shake the label of being that high of a pick. And so it took a while for him to, shake that label. But now he's really coming to his own as a backup big. And he's just played for a lot of different teams. Like every season, there are some games that he started, some games that he's coming off the bench, which is kind of wild to me. Like with the Wizards and the Raptors, he was starting games, obviously with the Suns in the beginning of his career. And that's not his role now. And it's so much better now that he is just allowed to play a role as a backup. He's made his money. He's gotten some solid contracts in his career, and now he can just each season sign with the Kings to a vet minimum. And it's a good relationship between the team and the player because it helps both sides. The Kings not having to sign him to a multi-year deal, which would affect their salary cap. Those minimum deals don't really affect the salary cap. And for Alex Len, the minimum deals just keep rising in value. And so he's just making more and more money. And I've always just been an Alex Len fan because I love a big that is just going to go out there and do the job of a shot blocking, screening big man. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. And these are the guys that I think are going to make a big impact off the bench this season. But every season, it feels like there's one guy that, at least one guy that doesn't really perform to expectations, and maybe one guy that leaps into that rotation surprisingly. And we also don't know what the final Kings roster is going to be yet, because the Kings did just make a move to bring in Terry Taylor on a training camp deal. So guys like this on the bench, they're never safe, especially the vet minimum guys. Trey Lyles feels pretty safe at this point, but Alex Len, Jordan McLaughlin, their spots are nowhere near safe. And there will be competition for those spots this upcoming season. But when you do look at who the Kings have on the roster right now, there aren't too many guys that I feel like could come for these spots, other than obviously Devin Carter, who's injured, and then Orlando Robinson. But we shall see. The Kings keep adding players, though, so there are more and more players for me to, do in these player previews. But next, I don't know, maybe I'll do Devin Carter, because I do want to do like an individual video for Devin Carter, even though he is injured. He is hopefully going to be an important part of this team, even if it isn't this season, hopefully in future seasons. And then I'll probably, group together guys like Jalen McDaniels, Orlando Robinson, the training camp guys, Boogie Ellis, Terry Taylor, Colby Jones as well in there. And then we got the two-way guys. So I will see you guys then. Peace.